We've got this whole sort of crazy journey, this pressure not to die. If you shave a biological age year off every year, you've hit immortality.
So the don't die narrative feels like bro science, and I say that with love and also with the feeling that it seems quite reductionistic. My counter narrative is don't miss the opportunity, don't miss the reverence, don't miss the awe, don't miss the eroticism, don't miss the aliveness.
To me, it's not so much about anti-aging as it's about fully aging. Live your fullest, healthiest life until the end.
I love that we're having this both and conversation. We're not saying don't pay attention to your biological pathways. We're saying let's do both. Let's make room for awe. Make room for these things that are so important for the human condition.
It is with the deepest gratitude that I am here with you both today. I'm thrilled for this conversation. I don't think any of us have any idea where it's going, but I want to give you a little bit of the background on my thinking, and then just we'll open it up and we'll allow it to guide us. So we're in the middle of thinking about longevity really all the time now. In fact, the name of our, masterclass is, functional medicine is longevity medicine. So here we are in the midst of this conversation. And the first thread that came to me was in a conversation I was having with a patient of mine whose mom died. And her mom had lived this beautiful life into her 90s. And then she passed suddenly. And my patient was there, in her birth state, in her, birth home, probably sleeping in her original childhood room. But she was just unfolding, family being there, and they had beautiful celebration of life. And listening to her and just witnessing it, I could feel this family, this extraordinary connection and bond. And it was so beautiful and meaningful. And I asked her, send me some photos. I mean, I could envision those 70s outfits and mom in the mix, doing, being a mom around these kids, and just how beautiful and amazing and what a delicious celebration it was. And so wonderful to be able to witness and, and hear that from her. So there's this conversation. And then we have these other very real conversations taking place today where, respected scientists like David Sinclair is, openly discussing escape velocity. If you shave a biological age year off every year, you've hit immortality. Harold Katcher, actually, he was a part of the original team that mapped out the BRCA1 protein. He has written about colonizing Mars. Aubrey de Grey, that's the first individual to live to 1,000, is here with us now. And then we've got this whole sort of crazy commercialization journey, this pressure not to die. So here we sit in the middle. And then actually, I just want to throw one other thought is, just historically thinking about the Egyptian pyramids and, the Mayan rituals, et cetera. There's just this journey of death and religion and how impactful it is. And here we sit today in, this idea of don't die. So Sara, I'm throwing all of that over to you. I just want to hear your thoughts on it. And then Patrick, right to you.
Thank you, Kara. It's a delight to start with the patient that you described, because it takes us to a place of meaning. It takes us maybe away from this idea of aging as an enemy to defeat, and instead aging as a transition in which we find meaning and messiness, all these components. And so the don't die narrative is super interesting to me. It feels like bro science. And I say that with love and also with skepticism and a feeling that it seems quite reductionistic. And I would say my counter narrative, which I am so excited to talk to the two of you about, is don't miss it. Like, don't miss the opportunity. Don't miss the reverence. Don't miss the awe. Don't miss the eroticism. Don't miss the aliveness. So what I feel when I hear some of these podcast hosts talk about, how much did you ruck today? Like, I got up to 80 pounds, or here's how I'm fixing my mitochondria, or red light therapy, that's the way to go. Like, I don't think the answer is tech enabled. I think it's much deeper and bigger than that. And I feel like we have to hold both worlds. There's a way that the bro science is hyper individualistic, and yet rather than try to raise your VO2 max every year, which I think is a worthy goal, I think it's so important for us to realize that one of the most important predictors of longevity is your social connections, your sense of meaning and purpose. So I'll start there. So excited to be in this conversation, but that's kind of my opener and how I approach this.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. I think, talking about even the blue zones, and the work there and those power principles in the blue zones, 4 of them are about that. They're about connection and community and being together with each other. 2 of them are about the view, of meaning and purpose and connection in life, which also has to do with connecting with others. Just 2 of them have to do with food, plant slant, if you will, and don't eat too much, wait for that side. Like, those are simple things, and move naturally. That these principles, which are the things that the centenarians are doing, that are different. They're not about red light therapy and mitochondrial resuscitation. Those are useful things, as you said. And where I go, I was thinking about this, and it's like, well, one of the first papers I remember reading about this was, and we've heard our friend and colleague and mentor, Jeff Bland, talk about this many times, but, James Fries talked about it in 1980 in the New England Journal in an article, that was called, Aging, Natural Death and the Compression of the Morbidity Curve. And so to me, it's not so much about anti-aging as it's about fully aging. Moving, and as Almond Schechter would say, moving from aging into saging, taking the role of the wisdom elder as we get older and seeing what that is. And that's lost in our culture at this point in time. And so, I take this and I move it into those relationships that I've had, of being taught by the wisdom elders and taught by native elders of how we move in the world and how we move with, old age, sickness, and death in a way that honors it, not that is trying to avoid it or push it away. And as you said, both said, and the goal to optimize health, to compress the morbidity curve, that's totally valid. Like, live your fullest, healthiest life until the end. And so I can talk about my mom in a moment. I just told you about her separately, but it's a great example of that.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. I will go ahead. Tell us about your mom.
Well, here we are, doing this, long planned conversation, and I'm 9 days from getting a call from the emergency room. My mom is 90, lives alone, still drives, takes care of herself, like moving, living in the community where, I lived, when I moved to when I was 3 years old. So that's over 60 years in this community. And they said, she's had an event. She's had a heart attack, and we want to take her to the cath lab. And I checked on what that was, and we've had conversations about living wills. And she's she taught nursing for 30 years, and said, well, if I if there's a possibility that I can live, then I want an intervention. But, if it's just going to be something that gets, that is meant to prolong my life, I don't want that. And so it's a hard decision, but it's like, okay, well, she's having an MI and she's healthy. She's incredibly healthy, and her mind is like sharper than mine at 90. And so we said, okay. And then when the cardiac surgeon said, well, she had a syncopal episode and she crashed in the CT scanner and she was coded, and we took her to the cath lab, and there were several lesions, but I could only take care of one because she was so tenuous and, kind of scared the whole, CT or the whole cath staff. But they put a stent in, they put a balloon pump in, they put a temporary pacer in, and I'm calling and getting a plane flight to go to Green Bay, Wisconsin, at 5:30 the next morning. And I'm on the plane and I'm like, is this going to be that ventilator conversation, going on? And by the time I'm leaving the Atlanta airport, I get a text from my sister who's here saying, she's extubated, she's up, she's talking, she's, fully with the program. Really? 90 years old? Fully with, having had all that, fully with the program. And she's here, she's getting ready to be discharged. They went back and took care of the second circumflex lesion because it was there. And she's doing great. I just played cards with her this morning, and she beat me, So it's like, so she's living that life of living fully until the end of her life. We don't know when that's going to be. And she said, no, I don't want to get coded again. That's good enough. I don't ever want that again. But, here she is living fully. And I think that's a testament to what we all want.
Yeah, absolutely. And no doubt, Patrick, and I think about my mom who's just living her best life at 83. She's your mom as my mom, and again, she has likely made some choices around lifestyle habits, I would assume. I know there's a very small minority of individuals who seem to be able to make any choice they want and live a long time without, with impunity, but very deliberately over many, many, many years, my mom has, picked up the brand, or taken a few extra steps, or went to bed on early, or, her myriad gave us brewer's yeast growing up and all sorts of stuff. But your
lunch sounds like my lunch, Kara.
That'll be
brown bread, super dense.
Yes.
Freshly made, like almond butter.
Oh my God,
Nobody
that's
wanted
right.
to swap food with me.
Never. In fact, the occasional sardine sandwich I am traumatized with. Clearing lunch tables in that case.
Yeah, she grew up on the farm, a one-room schoolhouse, kind of living that life, and, focusing on eating good food, and being able to walk and do yoga and those kinds of things. But really, I think the biggest part of it has to do for her with her faith, and a connection to a community that she's been deeply a part of for a long period of time.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thoughts around that, Sara?
Yeah, well, I love that we're reflecting on our ancestors and sort of what we've inherited. I grew up with a great-grandmother who came to my wedding at 96 and danced with every man in the room. I mean, sort of shamelessly, flirted shamelessly, and then died in her sleep a year later on no chronic medication. She had that compression and morbidity that you're talking about, Patrick. And that's really my model for aging. So I appreciate that very deeply. And I also appreciate that, I think we've had conversations offline about, Patrick, your experience with cancer. And now when it comes to longevity and meaning, there's the measurable and there's the unmeasurable. And so I'm curious, like what, Garrett, you published beautifully in Epigenetic Clocks on, how do we reverse biological aging? How do we do that in a short amount of time, 8 weeks with lifestyle medicine? That's so important. But what is it that we're not measuring? Like, what is the unmeasurable?
Yeah.
Where do we need to focus?
Yeah. I want to say something, and I want to just immediately punt this over to hear Patrick's thoughts. Yeah, especially around his experience with cancer, which, by the way, we have a beautiful podcast on that we'll link to somewhere where he talks deeply about it. But there's something called biological embedding, and this is an epigenetic phenomenon where the study has been around trauma, so we can see the biological embedding of trauma, past trauma experiences, even intergenerational, past trauma experiences embedded into our epigenome and prompting, lower thresholds for stress and for anxiety and so forth. And, but there's also a resilience phenomena that, no great surprise, is less well studied. But something that I've thought about in the face of this idea that we're nearing escape velocity, et cetera, so it's another one of those sort of inner conversations that I have, is that there's a biological embedding of wisdom. Like, there just simply has to be. And I think about when I was practicing, Zen Buddhism, our teacher would talk about us being potatoes in a pot, bumping up against each other and cleaning each other in this process of bumping up against each other. And I think about the fact that I am today in my 50s, really a better human. I'm more patient. My heart is open. I'm able to love. I'm able to be honest, less defended. All of these juicy, essential things are more present in my existence now by far, as I get older. And I believe, like, this has to be a biologically embedded phenomena. This information is somewhere, and maybe you're probably not far from actually having the tools to be able to measure them, as we can measure biological embedding of trauma. So there is some beautiful process in my mind that's occurring, and then there's more that I want to say, because I want to bump that against this idea of living forever, of wiping clean epigenetic marks so that we're younger. But before I do that, Patrick, just thinking about your experience around the cancer journey.
Yeah, well, there's so many things. Can we measure it? Does HRV measure it effectively? I mean, that might be one interesting thing to look at. And I talked about that in that podcast, because it was when I began to connect to the natural world after radiation and chemotherapy and getting outside, that all of a sudden, my prayer, my meditation, my eating the right food, all those things, they weren't getting the right sleep. They weren't the thing that affected my HRV. It was being outside and connecting and playing, so that's one aspect of it, is like finding what works for you. It's not the right thing for everybody, but it's finding, what are the things that actually enliven me, that engage me in life. And one of the things I found at that time, paradoxically, and I love to talk about it, is that uncertainty makes me feel more alive, like not knowing. What a paradox for us as scientists and clinicians, and it's like, getting at that edge of not knowing. Actually, there's an aliveness there. And so we find that in indigenous cultures and peoples, they've faced more difficult things than we're facing right now. We think things are really, really terrible, but they've been to points where their communities have been at the edge of living or dying, and they've listened, and they've been in that place of uncertainty and moved through it. And that's a normal phenomenon. It's normal for us to have fears of our own personal inadequacy, fears of others, and how we present, or that they may oppose us, and fears of the natural world, of what might come, and the uncertainty. Like, those are normal fears, but that actually creates the opportunity for courage to arise. We're going to have challenges in our life, and that's actually how we get both learned and earned wisdom to be able to go forward. And this is what the elders have taught us for a long period of time. And so it's like, we're not trying to make life easy for ourselves. That doesn't help us to actually learn and grow. It's when we're challenged is where the opportunity is. And so, whether, Sarah, with your experience, with Prako, with my experience with cancer, Kara, your experience, as a burgeoning parent, all these things, like, these are challenges. Like, there's no guidebook of how to do it. You can't just, let me watch the YouTube video and figure it out. No, it's like I have to learn through that process, and that's where the opportunity is. So this is where I feel like there's a little bit of hubris in the don't die movement. It's like, no, let's engage the challenges and recognize how life unfolds and how we as humans are. Now, can we live older, healthier? Absolutely. Is that a good thing? Probably a good thing, to create that opportunity. But let's not push against the normal cycles of life.
Yeah, I love that, Patrick. I feel like we're speaking out of both sides of our mouths right now, which I want to honor. Like, I think that's a much more realistic approach, where on the one side, we've got 3 functional medicine doctors who believe in these foundational aspects of taking care of yourself, getting the right nutrition, having the right connections that really serve you, being in nature, dialing in all of these biological pathways in the body and paying attention to them. And on the other side, we're saying, what about befriending uncertainty? And now this aging process, when you're in a rush to optimize and it's devoid of meaning and spirit, you run into problems. One of the things I heard, I don't want to gossip about Brian Johnson, but one of the things I heard that concerned me was that he doesn't sleep with anyone anymore. He has sex, but he doesn't sleep in a bed because it worsens his metrics. And he's decided that is critical for slowing down his aging process. And as you speak, Patrick, about, having room for uncertainty, having room for spontaneity, having room for the deepest connections with the people that you love and expressing it, I just think, oh my gosh, like, I can't even imagine giving up sharing a bed with someone that I love. So I love that we're having this both and conversation. I think it's really critical. We're not saying, don't pay attention to your biological pathways. We're saying, let's do both. Like, let's open the container, this sacred container that we're all talking about, and let's make room for the things that allow you to personalize, these forces that might be accelerating the aging process, but also make room for awe, make room for these things that are so important for the human condition.
Touching the mystery.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. It's because, like, optimizing opportunities for awe, that's what we want, and that allows us to, optimize our well-being, optimize living fully, and living and connecting to awe. And if you're not familiar with, Sarah, I think you are, but Dacher Keltner's work on awe is beautiful.
And you can actually do this in very dense biochemical mechanisms. Richard Lloyd, and you probably remember Patrick and Sarah, it's always said, embrace the uncertainty. In the densest thicket of the deepest, darkest biochemistry, there would be awe, because we will continue to unfold the mystery in these unexpected, really extraordinary ways. And so I think I appreciate us moving into this, because yes, it's just so much bigger, than what we know, than what we have the potential to know.
It is. And Kara, I love how you also frame this as at the molecular level, that we've got, you have so much expertise in epigenetic marks, and this concept of biological embedding that she mentioned. And I think there's a way that we tend to focus on the negative. We tend to focus on, okay, if your adverse childhood experience score is elevated, that maps to 45 different chronic diseases. You mentioned some of them. It's not just depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's also autoimmune disease and an accelerated clip to the aging process.
Yeah.
But along with that biological embedding are more positive marks that we want to be tracking. So yes, the negative ones are in some ways easier to document. We've done it in Holocaust survivors and people who went through Project Ice Storm in Canada and those who survived 9/11. But these, post-traumatic growth, the biological embedding of positive experiences and the opportunity that all of us have, even with a high score, to be a cycle breaker and to change our biology and the way it's expressed going forward. That to me is what's the most exciting. And that's my task, like along with the awe and the mystery, is to learn what I can to be a cycle breaker, change my own biology, and then learn how to share that forward.
Yes, absolutely.
And I interrupted you, Kara, so please.
It's so then. So one of the things that I was thinking about in this the biological embedding of wisdom, of maturation, of resilience, all these really beautiful things. We're tinkering with Yamanaka factors. We're tinkering with the ability to, change the aging phenomena as it's occurring on the epigenome. And, certainly a thought that I've had is, are we vulnerable to actually, reversing some of this hard, this growth journey, and we don't know that. And it's not a one-to-one relationship. I mean, in fact, I'll be talking to Vittorio Sebastiano in a little while, where he is specifically thinking about, using Yamanaka in the context of ovarian rejuvenation, which will then, allow bone health, heart health, brain health, skin health, etc. Not going in and scrubbing the brain clean. And so it's more subtle and more sophisticated than that. But, and this idea of immortality, of escape velocity, of don't die, we are certainly stepping aside from the mystery, it would appear, the idea of colonizing Mars, etc. I mean, I know this is wildly exciting to some individuals, wildly exciting, and probably trillions are being invested. I mean, is Jeff Bezos in his mind, planning his residence on Mars? But I'm open and certainly paying attention to where Altos Lab is going and to where Yamanaka Factor. All of that is going. To your point, Sarah, both sides of my mouth, both sides of my brain are here and working. I'm also aware of the many, many times we've made fools of ourselves as humans, thinking the appendix was vestigial, or, the very pivotal regulatory region of the DNA was junk, and so there's lots of different kind of thoughts ping-ponging around. And it also, seems like, living on Mars might not be that interesting. But anyway, throwing that out to whoever wants to go with anything there.
I want to jump in and kind of talk about, some of the wisdom elders that I hear, talk about, like, when you have an imbalance and you choose a technology approach to it. Well, the approach, the technology is neither good nor bad, but how humans work with it can be good or bad. But oftentimes, because of that, as choosing animals, it'll tend to complicate factors. And that, one teacher says, for every technological solution, you create 3 new issues that emerge from there. So it's not convincing to me that we have issues that are going to be resolved by technology. In fact, we look at the blue zones, and it's like, well,
yes,
these are the people who are living the longest, and none of those factors are technologic in nature. So how do we listen to the world and the unfolding of how movement occurs, and listen to the lessons that our elders have had before, and follow in, whether it's in the ceremonies, the traditions, the wisdom, doing things, learning from the past, because they have gotten through this, and they have gotten, have helped us to get to this point where we're at right now. So there's native wisdom, or the original instructions of how to be able to move in the world, and we don't spend very much time listening to those teachings. So how do we bring ourselves to that, and and that can include the scientific discoveries as well. It's not anti-science. In fact, when I look at someone like Alessio Fasano, and what his work is, it was actually through curiosity and failure and challenges that led him to discover, what he discovered with zonulin, and kind of validating this perspective of permeability issues having a huge effect on overall health and well-being. But it was because he had an idea, and it didn't work out the way he thought it was going to, and he learned from it. He wasn't defeated by it, but he also wasn't arrogant about it and presuming that, there's a problem with the study or something like that. And I see this happen where people, will cherry pick the data that they want. And this is part of my concern in the whole kind of don't die movement. From my own perspective, there's not really good data on human taking of rapamycin to be able to extend life. Do you really want to do that? You got no idea what's going to happen from that, or what the downstream long-term consequences are. And there may be other ways using natural agents that you can have the same benefits. So why are we trying to use our mind to manipulate our understanding of how we relate to the world, rather than listening with our heart, the master and his emissary? The brain is there to serve the heart. And so how do we do that? And how do we listen to the world in a way that is that connecting to spirit and essence and awe that Sara talked about?
Sara?
So beautiful, Patrick. I feel like there's rapamycin is such a good molecule for us to talk about, because, Kira, as you were talking about ovarian rejuvenation, I'm originally trained as a gynecologist, and so I've been tracking this longevity research on how to keep your ovaries younger, and how, the cells in our body that are richest in mitochondria are the eggs in women and the sperm in men. And that's where mitochondrial aging can show up first. And for women, that's often subfertility, infertility, and then perimenopause. So now rapamycin is being used to help rejuvenate the ovaries. And I feel like it's, once again, a focus on the wrong thing. There's so many other ways that we can work with the aging process. And I don't think a pharmaceutical is going to be the answer. Now, Patrick, you also invoked Alessio Fasano. I think his work is so poetic. When he talks about autoimmune disease, what he discovered with celiac and with other conditions, that you have this three-legged stool of genetic predisposition together with increased intestinal permeability and then a trigger. It feels like he's a functional medicine brother with the way that he came up with this three-legged stool. But going back to that boundary of, this interface that you have with the outside world in your gut, and how when you have a boundary violation, it makes you vulnerable to autoimmune diseases and other conditions. It feels like boundaries are such an important part of this conversation. And I want to say one other quick thing, just to provoke us a little bit. I just spent a few weeks in Bhutan, and one of the first experiences that we had was, Patrick, I love seeing you smile. It just makes me so happy. You just light up the whole screen. One of the first experiences we had, and I was with a group of somatic therapists and other physicians, was that we had a lama who gave us an empowerment on the 8 fears and how to work with the 8 fears. So I still have this on from a couple of months ago. And this is an ancient part of their tradition where you look at fear. We all experience fear of death, fear of loss. And this particular system looks at the 8 different causes of fear, and then it provides this long-earned wisdom for how to work with those 8 fears. And I just was so struck as I sat receiving this empowerment about this ancient approach to working with fear, which we're working with aging conversation, versus the way that we work with it in Western medicine, which is, oh, you have fear, you have anxiety, let's give you some Xanax. It's not, of course, functional medicine has a different approach, but I don't believe the answer is always to go to a pharmaceutical, right? We need to dwell in that both and conversation and really look at the root of it and look at, okay, what are the ways that fear is driving your behavior?
Patrick, you stood in the river. I talk about not going with the pharma.
Yeah.
And that turned around your cancer journey.
But it's also, what I want to say is it's also not the GABA producing psychobiotic. Like, we can go in that direction and try to, create another pill for an ill rather than really dealing with the root, of those fears that naturally arise in all of us. And they arise, when, especially when those boundaries are crossed, and so we may have some need to protect those boundaries as well. It's a beautiful metaphor around that. And, and in the process of, like, with cancer, it's both and, right? So it's chemotherapy and radiation therapy and, frequency specific microcurrent and acupuncture and tube feeds, but keto tube feeds, it's all those things, and finding out, well, where's that dance right for each individual, which requires us to listen to, have the patient, it's not even patient-centric anymore, but, moving towards patient-driven, like giving them the value of their health behaviors and helping them to be able to share. A friend of mine, a colleague, Sarah, we haven't talked about this, but, is actually now working in Bhutan, around Web3 tokenization of healthy behaviors, of the spiritual behaviors that make that the happiest country in the world. It's like, wow, there's a lot of opportunity here, to be able to go forth, of applying what we've learned, but not moving in a way where we think that the technology is the answer, but we're listening to the world in the process of it. That's what I love about this conversation.
So beautiful. It's so juicy. When I hatched this idea, you both were the first people I wanted to, who could I communicate with, who have the science brain and this heart and soul. And I'm so glad, after, our myriad WhatsApp conversations, we were able to have it, because it's just as beautiful, as I had hoped for. So immortality, colonizing Mars, escape velocity, or, life beyond death. Something, the great mystery. Drawing that out there for wherever it lands.
I have no idea. I sense that there is something more after this vehicle gives up and breathes its last breath, but I really have no idea. And I love this conversation too, and I feel like we could probably go another 6 to 12 hours. Thank you.
I think maybe the next conversation can focus on that, near-death experience and life after life kind of phenomena that is so commonly expressed, across almost every major religious tradition, spiritual tradition in the world. And I think there is something there. And there's also something to me that I felt early on in hearing those stories of the near-death experience of we're called to recognize the awareness of how we've lived our lives and how we done them in the best way possible. We have conversations that are going on in our mind or in our journals or in our dreams, that are looking at that all the time, and that's what we have the opportunity to do here. And I just feel honored to be a part of this conversation. And Kara, I think deep courage for you to say, "Hey, I'm going to look at this from a different perspective." So thank you.
There's a lot of clinicians listening, and regular folks are listening to us. I feel so deeply satisfied with this conversation, even as we're sitting in the unknown. We are so sitting in but there's something really juicy and comfortable and really ironically familiar, and safe about this, which is actually where I think you started, Patrick. But for clinicians listening, I mean, how might you, advise them to be with themselves, their families, their patients?
Well, Sarah's pause is sort of handing it to me, so I'll go first, and then I'll hear her and hear you, Kara, speak about that. I think that yes, it's finding the way to listen to one's heart. There's a sense, even just as I'm sitting right here, it's like, oh, like there's a part of me that living in the world knows how to move in the best way possible. And I don't always do that because I'm human. And, sometimes I remember and sometimes I forget. And that's human. But, finding a place where you can listen to that still small voice within, and I can give it the focus and the attention to say, wow, I care about myself and how I move in the world and how I can bring my gifts, the gifts that I was born with, into this world in the best way possible. And, so that, and I think a lot of that as a clinician centers in listening, in really deeply listening to our patients and our families and those loved ones, to listen in the deepest way possible, to allow them and give them space to explore and find their voice, their meaning and purpose.
It's beautiful, Patrick. Thank you so much.
And I think you're going to make me cry.
Sarah.
I hope that the practitioners who are listening feel a permission to speak out of both sides of their mouths. So on the one hand, we really believe in functional medicine, root cause medicine, looking for those biomarkers that need to be addressed, and also working with the exquisiteness of biological pathways and trying to remove the things that are getting in the way. And all of that is so important, but it's not the whole story. And I think what I hope our practitioners take to heart from listening to us is that, yes, you can suppress your epigenetic process. You can slow down your aging process. You could reverse biological age. And I think we have to look at, what about your more existential contributions? Like, how do we sit with those? How do we avoid this kind of reductionistic approach to these things that you can't reduce, to the things that you really have to feel? And going back to Bhutan, because this is still so alive in me, in Bhutan, they don't have a morning practice where you get up and you meditate for 10 minutes and then you do your cold plunge and your morning light at the same time, and then you're done, and then you get on your iPhone. Like, that's not how they live. They live in a way that spirit is part of every moment. It's part of every connection, every second of the day. And it really taught me to look at my own life and to question, okay, what are these choices I'm making? Like, I've got a lecture on sexuality that I'm a little bit late for right now. What are these choices that we make, and how are they affecting our biology? And what is the, sort of this interrelationship, this interdependence? How is that working for you? And then as we're working with individual patients and listening to their stories and helping them with their own molecular dance, what about their aliveness? What about those things that they're not measuring? How do we also bring that into the conversation?
Yeah.
And how do we model a different way? How do we model that counter narrative? I don't think it's good enough to say, I don't think don't die is the right approach. Don't miss it. But we also have to model that. We can't just speak the words. We've got to have the behavior.
Woo! Okay, so two things, and then we'll say goodbye. One is, I can't wait to give both of you big, massive, juicy hugs. Hopefully it's a group hug. We'll all see each other in the not so distant future, but it's beautiful in this setting as well. And one of the greatest gifts that I have from maintaining a practice where I'm encountering humans who want to walk with me, my patients, is the fact that I get to be present with them, and that there's this continual process of putting down this and opening to this human. And always, and for the last 20 years, that's the biggest fundamental gift for me. All of the other pieces are essential and incredibly important, and both sides of my mouth are alive and very capable of talking, and I love that. I love that analogy, Sarah. But yes, this gift of presence, and then Patrick, the mystery. Beautiful conversation, both. Thank you so much.
Thank you, beloveds.